Hi everyone, I've been meaning to do a review of my son's Hup Evo cyclocross bike for a while because I'm a cyclist, I have lots of bikes, and by far and away this is the bike that has given me the most pleasure to build and the most pleasure to watch my son ride on. Now he's only 6 years old, and I'm sure there's lots of people who will look at this and say, how and why have you spent so much money on a 6-year-old's bike? And on the face of it, yeah, I'd agree with you. But I hope through this video I can explain my thought processes as why this is actually an attempt to try and save some money in the long run, whilst giving my son the opportunity to ride something that he just loves. He absolutely adores riding and racing, particularly doing cyclocross, but I'm hoping this bike will also work well down the line as a road bike too. So I want to run you through how I've been able to get a 6-year-old onto such a big bike. And trust me, when you see the video of him riding, it is a big bike. And why it will save me money down the long run. So starting off with the frame, Hup are a small British company specialising in kids' bikes and kids' clothing. We went to see them over near Milton Keynes when Jess was only 5 years old, and I was just blown away with the amount of thought and attention they were putting into their bikes. Now, by trade, I'm a bike fitter, and the second I saw their bikes and what they were doing, I could see exactly how and why it works to be able to get kids onto as big a bike as you possibly can. And they're doing a lot of the tricks that I've been doing to get kids onto bigger bikes so that they last longer. So the goal with this bike is to be able to have a frame that can take a 700C wheel as early as possible. Now, the part of the way to do that is the top tube drops very steeply down to make the standover as low as possible. But the geometry is designed to keep the cockpit length quite short. Now, the bike at the moment I'm running on 650C wheels. This is so that it just drops the overall platform of the bike lower down, so the reach to the floor is just that little bit less than 700s. But you'll see from the front here that there's plenty of room to go to a 700C wheel when he's ready, when he's big enough for it. Now, the bike is designed as a cyclocross bike, but it puts some slick tires onto the wheels, and it will be a great road bike as well. You'll see pictures of them being ridden doing bike packing and road racing and all sorts. They do a road bike and a track bike as well, but this is the route I wanted to go because disc brakes allow me to run the smaller wheels for cyclocross and while he's still small. But then in a year or two when he's ready, we'll go to a full 700C wheel and race on the road as well. And it will allow me to share wheels with him at a much earlier age. So it's an aluminium frame with a carbon fork, and I could not believe how light the fork was for the cost of the frame. It's an amazing bit of kit. And then pairing that, the other Hup item that we've got on here is the crank. Now, that is a 130mm crank length, which is incredibly important when you're looking at little small riders, because their legs are only so long, and having big long cranks means that they end up having to come way too high over the top of the pedal stroke and just bounce around. This little tiny small crank here allows him to spin super quick and super fast. Now, I also wanted to get as smaller chainring as I possibly could on the bike. So this is an absolute black. It's actually a slightly ovalized chainring. And that allowed me to get a smaller sprocket at the back, at the front, a chainring at the front, because at the back I wanted to run a nice big spread of gears. So this is an 11 through 36, 11 speed SRAM Apex 1x system at the back. So clutch in the rear mech to keep the chain tension on, and this will allow me with the little 30 tooth chainring at the front, when we go and do some of the kids road racing where they're limited in the gear that they can run, I'll only need to block off the last two sprockets while we're still on a 650 size wheel to get it within the gear restriction. When he then steps up to being an under 12, we can then unlock the some of the sprockets at the back, and then gradually, as we get bigger still, we'll up the size of the chainring at the front there. I've also waxed his chain because I love waxing chains. They keep it nice and clean and the muck just drops off it. To go with the scheme, I've got this lovely yellow Jaguar cabling, both for the gears and for the brakes on the other side. Speaking of brakes, I've gone for just a mechanical brake. Now this is a TRP Spire brake with just a simple little 140mm rotor, both front and rear. This is because he's 6, he weighs nothing. He doesn't need the stopping power of a hydraulic to pull him down from speed. A mechanical system like this, particularly the TRP Spire, where the both brake pistons pull simultaneously from both sides when you pull the brake. This gives plenty of stopping power for his little hands. Speaking of little hands, I've got the Avid brake levers up here, where you can really adjust both the reach and the adjustment on where the contact is, so you can dial that in. Now, eventually we'll go to a drop handlebars on this bike, and going with a mechanical system as opposed to a hydraulic means I can then put on these brake levers relatively cheaply, and will progress this bike from this flat bar setup. And we've had to go on flat bar because the reach from the saddle to the bar, he's only 6, so he doesn't have a lot of torso and arm. So flat bar means it's the shortest we can make this bike. Speaking of keeping things short, we've got the stem. This is an FSA SLK dropper stem, and you can see it's a 50mm, and it just drops right in front of the head tube. There is a tiny amount of room between the stem and the head tube, but this keeps the drop between the saddle and the bar to a point where it's usable for him, because he's only small. Speaking of being only small, the saddle height, I have done every little trick possible to reduce the distance between the crank and the saddle. So at the seat post here, I've inverted the clamp. Now I'm sure Pro, when they made this seat post, did not intend it to be run this way, but again, he doesn't weigh much, so he's not putting a lot of force onto it, so I'm happy with that. But that drops a few centimeters here. I've actually had to just sand this seat post ever so slightly to just creep a few extra mil out of the drop on the seat post, and it is just about perfect for him now at 6 years old. I've also rotated the seat post through 180 degrees, so rather than going up and laying back, this goes up and lays forward. This keeps his center of mass over the top of the bike and allows him to get a little bit more weight onto the front tire to get better traction out of the front tire. As I say, this is a bike that we're wanting to progress the build. So we've started out on these 650 wheels. Now these are made by Token. These are the G23AB wheels, aluminium wheel, but I was so surprised with how light these were for the money. These are not cheap wheels, but they are relatively affordable as a performance wheel go. We'll keep him on these wheels for quite a long time off-road because, you know, on cyclocross where you're wanting to jump on and off, having the overall height of the bike and the saddle to ground height a little bit lower will just allow him to more easily jump on and off the bike. Getting to off-road tyres in this size in something that's cyclocross specific was a little bit of a challenge, but Schwalbe make this X1 all-round in the right size, and they're tubeless as well, so we can run really low pressures and get the grip required for off-road, because again, because he doesn't weigh much, you need to run really low pressures off-road. Now, the progression for this bike and the reason why it will save some money in the long run, yes, spending well north of £1,000 on a kid's bike is ridiculous. I know it's ridiculous, but when he's grown out of this frame, we will port everything here across to the next frame. So we're not going to have to buy a new group set. We're not going to buy new wheels. Because the next size of frame will take exactly the same wheels. We're not having to buy things again. So all we'll need to do is change the frame. So in the long run, because we're not having to buy parts again and again and again, we're hoping this will save a little bit of money. And in the short term, it means that he's riding on something that is light. He can pick up, he can move around. The bigger wheels just roll over the bumps and it just puts smiles on faces. It really does, both mine and his. And we look forward to many more years of racing on this bike and the results coming and enjoying racing and riding. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this review. We think they're great bikes. Check them out, and if you get a chance to go and test ride one, do it. They're brilliant. Thanks.